The first thing Maria smelled when she stepped into the gleaming stainless steel kitchen wasn't garlic or vinegar, it was doubt. The kind that hung heavy in the air, thicker than steam. Rows of chefs in pristine white coats turned to glance at her, their expressions polite but condescending, their eyes flicking to her name tag as if they could already tell she didn't belong here. Maria Santos. Philippines, it read in plain black print. To them, that meant one thing. A third-world cook from a tropical island who probably knew how to fry fish but not how to plate cuisine worthy of the world stage. Maria swallowed her nerves and forced herself to smile. This was the Global Culinary Invitational, held in New York City, where the best chefs from 20 countries competed not just for a trophy, but for recognition. She'd been selected after years of working her way up from a carinderia in Manila to an executive sous chef in a 5-star hotel in Makati. She should have felt proud. Instead, all she felt was the cold stare of expectation, mostly the kind that wanted her to fail. As she set her ingredients on the counter, tamarind pulp, kangkong labanos gabi sitaw eggplant, and freshly cleaned pork belly, she could already hear the snickers from 2 chefs across her station. Is that vegetables and tamarind? One whispered in a British accent. Looks like she's making soup from leftovers. Maria pretended not to hear. She'd been through worse. In the Philippines, she'd cooked through typhoons, blackouts, and political scandals. But this was different. This was the world watching. A tall American chef named Derek approached her, flashing a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was last year's champion, known for his truffle-infused steak and his arrogant charm. Hey, you're from the Philippines, right? What's your dish? Maria wiped her hands on her apron and answered softly, Sinigang. Pork sinigang, he chuckled. Never heard of it. Some kind of stew? It's a sour soup, she said, trying to sound confident. Made with tamarind and local vegetables. It's a comfort food, he interrupted. Cute. I'm sure it's great back home, but this is a fine dining event. Just letting you know. He winked before walking away, leaving the faint scent of truffle oil and arrogance behind him. Maria's fingers trembled for a moment. But she took a deep breath, remembering what her mother used to say. Anak, sinigang is not just food. It's memory. It's home in a bowl. She began to work. The kitchen filled with the sound of sizzling pork belly as she rendered the fat, adding onions, tomatoes, and the tamarind broth she had painstakingly brought from Manila. The scent rose slowly, rich and tangy, wrapping around her like a protective cloak, but to the others it was strange. Too earthy, too simple. Too Filipino, smells like vinegar soup, someone muttered behind her. Another laughed. Maria didn't respond. She focused on the simmering pot, adjusting the seasoning, tasting carefully. The balance had to be perfect, sour, savory, comforting. Sinigang wasn't meant to dazzle the tongue with complexity. It was meant to make your heart remember something you didn't know you'd lost. As the hours passed, judges roamed the kitchen, observing, taking notes. One stopped in front of her station, a French woman with sharp eyes and sharper words. What are you cooking, mademoiselle? Maria smiled nervously. Sinigang, ma'am. It's a traditional Filipino sour soup. The judge tilted her head. Soup for a main course? It's how we eat it, Maria said. With rice. Always with rice. The judge frowned slightly, then scribbled something on her clipboard before moving on. Maria's stomach twisted. She knew that look. It was the same look she'd seen when tourists tried balut for the first time, curiosity laced with disgust. By the time the cooking round ended, her confidence had begun to crack. All around her were golden crusts, delicate foams, perfectly seared meats plated like art installations. And there she was, with a steaming bowl of sinigang that looked to an untrained eye like a humble soup from a roadside eatery. When the judges called for plating, she placed her dish gently on the table. She had used a minimalist black bowl to contrast the colors, the green of the kangkong, the red of the tomatoes, the soft beige of the pork. A small mound of jasmine rice sat beside it, sprinkled with crispy garlic bits. Next to her, Derek was flamboyantly torching his Wagyu beef. Cameras flashed. The crowd murmured in admiration. Maria's hands were shaking. Then came the tasting. One by one, the judges sampled the dishes. When they reached Maria's station, the Frenchwoman raised a spoon, dipped it into the broth, and took a sip. Her expression didn't change. She moved on to the next bowl. Maria's heart sank. After the round, she overheard whispers. It's too sour. Too rustic. Not innovative. She's clearly out of her depth. When the announcement came that evening, she already knew she wasn't going to be among the finalists. Still, when they called the names of the top 5, and hers wasn't one of them, it stung like a burn. She clapped politely, smiling even as her chest tightened. Cameras panned to the winners holding their plaques, while she quietly cleaned her station. "Better luck next time," Derek said, patting her shoulder. "Maybe try something." "Less weird next year," Maria nodded. She wanted to scream, to throw the pot across the room, to tell them that Sinigang wasn't weird. It was her childhood, her identity, her country. But instead, she packed up her knives and walked out. Outside the convention hall, the New York winter air hit her like a slap. She sat on the curb, holding the small container of leftover Sinigang she had saved. Steam rose from it in the cold like a tiny ghost of home. She took a spoonful. It was still perfect, warm, sour, comforting. Tears blurred her eyes as she whispered, "Mama." "Maybe they'll never understand." A soft voice broke through her thoughts. "Excuse me," someone said. Maria looked up. A man in a gray overcoat was standing nearby, holding a camera. His face was familiar. She'd seen him earlier, filming the competition. He looked awkward, like he didn't want to intrude. "Sorry," he said. "I was covering the event." "You're Maria, right? The chef from the Philippines?" She nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but—" "That smell," he said with a smile. "It reminded me of my trip to Cebu. I had something like that there, sour soup with pork. It was amazing." "What do you call it again?" Maria blinked. "Sinigang. Right, Sinigang," he repeated, tasting the word like it was new. "Would you mind if I tried it?" Maria hesitated, then handed him a spoon. He took a small sip, and his eyes widened. "Wow," he said. "This is incredible, I don't even know how to describe it." "It's comforting." "Like eating a memory," Maria smiled faintly. "That's exactly what it is," he grinned. "I'm writing a feature for an online food magazine. Would you let me tell your story? People should know about this dish." For the first time that day, something warm flickered in Maria's chest. Hope. The next week, an article appeared on the front page of Global Plate, a popular culinary site. The most underrated dish at the Global Culinary Invitational, a Filipino chef's sinigang that stole our hearts. The article went viral. Thousands of Filipinos shared it, proud tears filling their eyes as they read about a humble dish that carried their story across oceans. Maria received messages from strangers, OFWs in Dubai who said they missed home, students in London craving sinigang, mothers in Canada sharing recipes in the comments section. For once, people saw what she'd always known. Filipino food wasn't inferior. It was soulful. It was powerful. But not everyone was happy. A few days later, Maria received an email from one of the competition judges. It was polite, but cold. "While we appreciate the cultural significance of your dish, please refrain from using the Global Culinary Invitational's name for promotional purposes. We wish you success in your future endeavors." It was a warning. They didn't like that her story had stolen the spotlight from their official winners. And behind that email, something darker was brewing, because some people, especially those who had mocked her, Sinigang, weren't ready to accept that a dish so simple could shake their carefully built world of elitism. Maria had no idea that her quiet defiance, her bowl of humble soup, had just made her enemies in the highest corners of the culinary world, enemies who would soon make sure she paid for it, but not before the world finally learned the truth about Sinigang. The morning after her article went viral, Maria woke up to hundreds of unread messages. Her phone buzzed endlessly, Facebook tags, Instagram mentions, even emails from strangers who called her Chef Maria, the pride of the Philippines. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the flood of comments. "Reading your story made me cry. I miss my mom's sinigang. You made us proud, kabayan." Finally, Filipino food gets the spotlight it deserves. For a moment, Maria couldn't breathe. It was overwhelming. She wasn't used to praise, not after years of being invisible in kitchens where foreign chefs took credit for her work. Her small apartment in Queens felt warmer than ever. She stood by the window, looking out at the gray New York skyline. The air was cold, but her heart was burning with something fierce, validation. She poured herself a cup of coffee and smiled. Maybe, just maybe, this was her moment. But fame is a double-edged knife. And in Maria's world, knives cut deep. At noon, her phone rang. It was Chef Anton, her mentor from the Philippines, a man who'd guided her since her Carinderia days. His voice was steady, but she could hear worry beneath it. Maria, anak, congratulations. Everyone here is talking about you. But listen, I've been getting calls, some from the Department of Tourism, even from local press. Maria's chest tightened. Calls? Why? They want to use your story, feature you in promotions, maybe send you to represent the Philippines abroad. But, his voice trailed off. But what, chef? There are people, he said carefully, powerful ones who don't like what you did. The event organizers weren't happy. They said you embarrassed their brand. And that American chef, what's his name, Derek? He's been saying things, Maria frowned. What kind of things? That you cheated, Anton said quietly. That the viral article was staged. That the journalist you spoke to was your friend. Maria froze. That's not true. I know, Anak. But truth doesn't always matter. The foreign press is starting to pick it up. Be careful. Her coffee suddenly tasted bitter. She thanked him, hung up, and sat down on her couch. The joy from earlier that morning had evaporated, replaced by a slow, creeping dread. By evening, the story had twisted. Headlines began to circulate online. Did Filipino chef manipulate food media for sympathy? Judges question validity of viral Filipino dish story. The same people who'd praised her sinigang 2 days ago were now tearing her apart. Comments flooded her social media again, but this time, they weren't kind. She's just playing the victim card. Typical Pinoy drama. She's making the country look desperate, Maria wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them about the sweat, the sleepless nights, the ridicule she'd endured. But when she tried to post a clarification, trolls swarmed her comment section, calling her names, mocking her accent in video interviews. The online world had turned into a storm, and she was the lone house in its path. 3 days later, she received an email from the management of the hotel where she worked as an assistant chef. The subject line read, "Notice of suspension." Her throat went dry as she opened it. Following recent online controversies involving your participation in the Global Culinary Invitational, we are temporarily suspending your employment pending investigation. She read it twice. Then a third time, as if the words might change. But they didn't. She'd been fired without being fired. Her hands shook. She threw the phone onto the couch and sank to her knees. This was supposed to be her breakthrough. Instead, it was breaking her life apart. The next week was a blur. She avoided calls from family back home, not wanting them to hear the pain in her voice. The journalist who had written the viral article, his name was Alex, sent her a message apologizing. "They're threatening to sue me," he wrote. "I had to take down the article." I'm sorry, she didn't blame him. She blamed the system. The same system that glorified Western chefs for discovering foreign cuisine, but mocked Filipinos for cooking their own. But anger wasn't enough to pay rent. By the end of the month, Maria had sold her knives, her aprons, even her rice cooker. She picked up shifts in a small diner in Queens, flipping pancakes and frying eggs for customers who didn't care who she was. Every night after work, she'd stop by a nearby Asian grocery store. She couldn't afford much, but she always bought tamarind. Sometimes kangkong if it was fresh. On weekends, she made sinigang for herself in her tiny apartment. It was her therapy, her prayer. One cold Saturday, as snow fell softly outside, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find a man she hadn't expected to see again. "Chef Derek," she said coldly. He smirked, his coat dripping melted snow. "Mind if I come in?" She didn't answer. He walked past her anyway, glancing around the small apartment. "Cozy," he said. "A little downgrade from the competition kitchen, huh?" Maria crossed her arms. "What do you want?" "I came to offer you a deal," he said, pulling out a piece of paper from his pocket. "My restaurant's expanding. I need a consultant. You've got a name now, even if it's controversial. You join me, and we'll call the whole media fiasco water under the bridge." Maria blinked. "You're joking," he grinned. "Come on. You're not really going back to Manila, are you? You'll just end up in some local TV cooking show, making adobo for old ladies. This is your chance to stay relevant." She stared at him, the memory of his laughter at the competition burning fresh in her mind. "You want me to work for you?" "Think about it," he said smoothly. "I'll even let you put sinigang on the menu, if you make it fancy. Maybe deconstructed with foam and tamarind gel." "That'll sell," Maria's jaw tightened. "You don't understand, Sinigang," she said quietly. He shrugged. "I understand money, and right now you don't have any." He left the paper on her table, a contract promising her a decent salary, a title, and the humiliation of selling her soul. When the door closed behind him, Maria sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering everything in white. She stared at the contract, her reflection warped on its glossy surface. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with memories, her mother's voice, her first carinderia, the smell of sinigang simmering during rainy afternoons. She stood up, turned on the stove, and began cooking. She didn't even think. Her hands moved on their own, washing the pork, slicing the vegetables, crushing the tamarind. Soon, the apartment filled with that familiar scent. Tangy, warm, real. When it was done, she looked at the steaming bowl and whispered, "They'll never understand, but maybe," she thought, "she could make them." The next morning, Maria posted a video online. She didn't edit it. No fancy transitions, no music. Just her in her kitchen, wearing a plain apron, speaking directly to the camera. "My name is Maria Santos," she began, her voice steady but her eyes wet. "I was called a cheater. I was told my food was weird. But this," she held up a ladle of sinigang, "this is who I am. This is the Philippines. We are not weird. We are flavor, history, and heart." She took a spoonful on camera and smiled through tears. "To everyone who thinks Filipino food isn't worth a world stage, try this. And tell me you don't feel something." Then she ended the video. She didn't expect much. But within hours, the video exploded. Millions watched. OFWs cried watching her eat. Bloggers wrote think pieces about culinary discrimination. Even local celebrities shared her clip with captions like "proud to be Filipino." Within days, she became a movement. Hashtags flooded social media. Sinigang Pride, Maria Santos. Filipino food deserves better, but the bigger her light shone, the darker the shadows became. One night, after coming home from the diner, she found her apartment door slightly open. Her heart skipped. She stepped inside cautiously. Nothing looked stolen, but her laptop was gone. So were her recipe notebooks. Her stomach dropped. The next day, a new restaurant opened in Manhattan, owned by none other than Chef Derek. The featured dish? Sour Harmony, a modern take on Asian comfort soup. The ingredients were unmistakable: pork belly, tamarind, water spinach, eggplant. He had stolen her sinigang. Maria's hands shook as she watched a promotional video of him plating her dish, describing it as an original fusion inspired by Southeast Asian flavors. She wanted to throw her phone. She wanted to scream. But then she saw the comments below the video, people praising his innovation. It was happening again. He was stealing her story, her culture, her soul, and the world was letting him. Maria stood by her window that night, tears of rage streaming down her face as New York glowed below her. This time, she swore to herself she wouldn't stay silent. If he wanted to play dirty, she would play brave, and the world would finally taste the truth. By the time Saturday rolled around, the entire office was buzzing with anticipation. Clara's Sinigang Night, as they jokingly called it, had become the week's most talked-about event. What started as a casual invitation had evolved into something almost ceremonial. Even Mr. Chen, their usually stoic boss, asked if he could drop by to taste the famous Filipino soup. Clara, both nervous and excited, spent the morning preparing. The air in her apartment was heavy with the scent of tamarind, garlic, and simmering pork. She carefully sliced the vegetables, adjusted the sourness, and tasted every batch as though the entire soul of her homeland depended on this one dish. For her, it wasn't just about food. It was about identity, pride, and being seen beyond the stereotypes. When her guests arrived, the small apartment transformed into a lively gathering. Shoes were lined up by the door, and the sound of laughter filled the space. Marissa came first, carrying a bottle of wine and an apology written across her face. "I brought something to make up for my rudeness," she said sheepishly. Clara smiled, shaking her head. "You didn't have to, but I'm glad you came." Then came Jake and his partner, holding a small box of desserts. "We figured we should bring something in case your food really is too weird for us," Jake teased. Everyone laughed, and the tension that once existed began to dissolve like sugar in warm tea. As Clara ladled out the sinigang, the room fell into a soft hush. The broth shimmered golden brown under the light, the vegetables vibrant and inviting. She served each bowl with care, watching their faces closely as they took their first spoonfuls. Marissa's eyes widened. Jake paused mid-bite, his brows furrowed as though his brain was processing something profound. Then almost in unison, they both went for another spoonful. Wait. This is actually good, Jake muttered, looking surprised. Good? It's amazing, Marissa said, already scooping up more. It's sour but warm at the same time, like comfort food with a twist. Even Mr. Chen, who had been quietly eating in the corner, set down his spoon and nodded approvingly. This is balance, he said. Sourness, salt, and heart. It reminds me of home, even though it's not my culture. You can taste love in it, Clara smiled quietly. For the first time, she didn't have to explain or defend her food. It spoke for itself. By the middle of dinner, the table was alive with laughter, stories, and clinking glasses. They asked about the ingredients, the memories tied to the dish, the way her mother used to cook it on rainy afternoons. Clara told them everything, how sinigang wasn't just a soup, but a feeling of home. In the Philippines, she explained, we don't measure how good food is by the flavor alone, but by how it brings people together. Marissa raised her glass. Then tonight, your sinigang did exactly that. By the time the last drops were gone, everyone was reaching for seconds, or arguing for the last spoonful. Jake, who once mocked her for bringing weird food, ended up scraping the pot clean with a piece of bread. If this is weird, he said with a grin, then I want weird every day. They laughed until their sides hurt, and for a moment, it felt like a small corner of the Philippines had bloomed right there in her apartment. When everyone finally left, Clara sat alone at the table, surrounded by empty bowls and the warm hum of her kitchen. She smiled to herself, not just because they liked her cooking, but because something deeper had shifted. On Monday, the office was different. The once isolated Clara was now greeted with genuine smiles. People asked her for the recipe, joked about organizing a Sinigang Sunday, and some even brought dishes from their own countries to share. What started as mockery had turned into connection. Weeks passed, but the Sinigang story lingered like the aftertaste of tamarind, sweet and sour, unforgettable. Clara became the unofficial chef of the office, and every now and then, someone would bring up that first night with laughter. But what made her happiest wasn't the praise. It was when Marissa quietly pulled her aside one afternoon and said, I told my mom about your sinigang. We tried making it last night. I think she loved it more than her chicken noodle soup. Clara's eyes softened. That means a lot, Marissa smiled. I guess it's true. Sometimes the best things are the ones we didn't understand at first. That evening, as Clara walked home, the air smelled faintly of rain. She thought of her mother back in Manila, of the little kitchen where she first learned to cook, and of the laughter that filled the house whenever sinigang was on the stove. She realized something profound. Food wasn't just culture. It was memory. It was belonging. It was a language without words that could heal wounds, mend pride, and bridge worlds. At the end of the day, what started as an insult had become a reminder that authenticity, when shared with kindness, always finds its way into hearts. And as Clara stirred the leftover broth later that night, she whispered softly to herself, they called it weird once. Now it tastes like home to them, too. Outside, the rain began to fall again, gentle, rhythmic, familiar, just like the simmer of sinigang.